Thanks, guys. We're here with our first live guest this morning on FreightWaves Now. We've got our warehousing and logistics editor, Mark Solomon, joining us today. Mark, thank you so much for taking time out of your morning to come hang out with us.
Thank you, Kaylee. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm okay.
Good. So you focus on warehousing and logistics for us. You write those articles that go up on FreightWaves.com. Talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing as far as capacity constraints right now. Obviously, the entire market is tight when it comes to sourcing truck capacity. What about finding places to keep your goods?
Okay. The warehousing market has been on fire for the last 2 years. And actually, it's been strong for the last 10, but in the wake of COVID and the continued surge in e-commerce fulfillment demand, the market for space continues to tighten, particularly in big commerce centers. What's adding to the problem right now is the lack of construction materials, and that's becoming a big issue with everybody who needs to build, who needs to occupy. The cost of steel has gone through the roof. The availability has shrunk dramatically. And there are people in the industry who followed it for many years who believe that it's going to take many months for projects to be completed. Projects that could have been done maybe by the middle of the year or July may have to wait till the fall. And that presents a problem. It's a headwind, but it certainly doesn't change the fundamentals of the business. And eventually, as supply and demand returns to some type of equilibrium, things will get back to their red hot normal before these capacity shortages and product shortages took effect.
Yeah, so Mike Vincent here. Thanks for coming on. So the warehouse capacity is obviously in trouble, right? We talked about it before because you couldn't. There was, I forget how many millions of extra space we needed, right, based on the volumes that are going through there. But you've got sales to inventory ratios very, very low, right? So so we got to refill that stuff. But also you've got the rise of more flexible warehousing space, like the people like WareCap, for instance, and Flex. I think Flex Space is another one there. Is that not giving enough supply of warehousing space to handle all this?
It's the market's way of innovating to respond to the overall tightness. It helps on the margin, but for big box retailers with enormous e-commerce volumes, it doesn't really move the needle all that much. It's fine for people or for companies that don't demand or require a lot of space in which to fulfill. It helps. Every little bit helps in this market. It doesn't alleviate the overall tightening. I mean, some markets you're seeing you're seeing space availability at maybe 1% to 2%. That's remarkable. And asking rents continue to rise. The latest cycle, which is, hopefully will dissipate once supply and demand come into balance, will make things even more difficult for tenants and lessees. It's just everything coming together right now. E-commerce demand remains highly elevated. A lot of brick and mortar retail will not return to stores. Many American consumers are conditioned to buy online after a year of this. And it's, I don't see any macro changes in the macro environment anytime soon.
No, even those that you would never suspect would adopt the e-commerce thing have.
They've had to move. It's e-commerce or be left behind at this point. Mark, so
it's not just costs are rising all across the board. I mean, warehouse labor, which lagged general inflation for many years, is now outpacing inflation considerably. It will cost $20 to $21 an hour to hire and retain qualified labor. Those are costs that are going to have to be either eaten on the front end or passed on.
That was going to be my question, is that it's not just the space that's at a shortage, it's
Yeah.
the people to manage that space too. And it seems like every time I turn on the radio, I'm hearing ads for warehouse workers needed, dock workers needed, all of this stuff. And so we talk about the idea of the Amazon effect, right? People are wanting to go work for Amazon because they're getting better pay and they're seeing those hours and it's really a guaranteed job. Is that kind of competition pattern or the Amazon effect going to drive these other warehouses to kind of mirror their take on employee wages or employee time?
When Amazon enters a market, they vacuum up all available labor that wants this kind of job. There's not much left for other operators in specific markets, and Amazon enters. That being said, uh, the the gap between Amazon and other operators in terms of starting pay, increases in pay, benefits, and amenities is narrowing. It's not that Amazon can no longer corner the market based on its offerings relative to everyone else. Everyone else is now elevating their game
Hmm.
to compete with Amazon for available labor because it's a problem that everyone faces.
So, Mark, let me ask you this: does that create potentially a positive outcome in that it attracts more labor to this sector and away from other services where they've been, laid off and not quite opening up the way they should be? In other words, providing more a relief to the labor shortage for warehousing.
One would hope so. That being said, as long as unemployment benefits remain fairly generous, and I believe I could be wrong on this, but they're supposed to run until September. Uh, People do the math and say, "Well, why should I bust my butt for 14, 15 an hour when I can stay home
Yeah.
and have the same cash flow and do nothing?" I mean, it sounds crude, but that's an issue facing everybody in what would be classically considered a blue collar industry.
Yeah, it's causing. I mean, we saw it in O'Hare, where the warehousing and the logistics there, they were moving off of the tarmac, the freight coming into warehouses, and they couldn't move it through those warehouses because they didn't have the employees to move
Right.
that stuff. But Mark, we've got obviously a holiday coming up. What do you see some of the effects on shipping, and especially does not theft and increase over the weekend through logistics?
Well, what increases over the weekend are thefts
Yeah.
because it's a holiday. There's a fair amount of volume, and many truckers take the weekend off, park their vehicles, maybe less vigilant about what's going on with their equipment. And, you always see that. There's always a bump. Uh, what you're seeing now, based on data from an organization called CargoNet, more thefts of computer related electronics, typically the electronic stuff that gets stolen are televisions.
Hmm. Yeah.
But they're seeing, particularly in California, and it seems like everything is bigger in California. Uh, there's more theft of computer equipment, computer electronics, as they call it, relative to the consumer electronics like televisions and other types of homeware.
Mark, we've got about 30 seconds left. Give us just a quick little synopsis about what you're working on coming up next on FreightWaves.com.
All right. Well, actually, try to make this very brief. Uh, the travelers did a risk study or survey of 1,000 drivers and asked them what their behavior was during 2020, which was an extraordinary year for mobility. And you would be shocked at the number of people who admit that they shop online while they're driving and take videos and photos while they're driving. We all know about texting and maybe Facebooking, but the number of people who feel that the roads are safe enough for them to shop online while in motion. Anyway, the reality is for truckers, they have to be more careful than ever before. Their fleets have to be more vigilant because people think that it's safer out there, so they can engage in behaviors, risky behaviors that they wouldn't have in the past. It's getting a lot more dangerous on the roads because of motorist behavior, and truckers have to be mindful of that.
Never ceases to amaze me. Thanks so
Nope.
much for joining us today, Mark. We'll look forward to
You're
hearing from you
welcome,
soon.
guys.
Thank you, Mark.